Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. For the next half an hour or so, we're going to talk a little bit about forestry, an overview of the forestry scene. Forestry, there's a lot involved, from planting to harvesting, from recreation to cutting timber. So I have some slides. I'm going to explain a little about it, and if you find it interesting, maybe we'll come back and have another chat some other time. Thank you. Okay, John Lyons here again, and I'm working with Coillte in Macroom and have been for the last 20-something years. So we'll talk generally about the forestry scene. Now, the government set very ambitious targets for afforestation, that's planting. And if you look back at the history, in the year 1600, in the Middle Ages, there was 16% of the land of Ireland under forestry. Whereas in the 1900s, just a century ago, this was gone down to 1%. So very little forest or natural forest left in the country. And after that, around the 1940s, the government set up a program to plant the land, and that continued on and is still continuing. So we're right back up again to 9%. And there is a target, the government have set a target by the year 2030 that we should be up to 16%. And even at that, we're still well behind the European average, and some countries in Scandinavia have upwards on 60 and 70% under forestry. The planting of the forests was carried out by crawler machines generally, like bulldozers, small bulldozers with wide pads. They were on very soft ground. The government policy was to buy this cheapest land they could get. So this is a typical site that was planted. It's a double moldboard plough that was used. So a sod was turned on this side and this side. And the plants were planted on the very top of the sod. There's a little plant, if you can see it. There's another plant here. So this was a great means of getting trees established. They were well above the vegetation. They had good drainage and they had good growth. But nobody ever thought about how they were going to take them out 30, 40 years later. It was all manual work for planting trees at this stage. Times have changed. This is an example of a Swedish machine that's working in the country, and it's now planting small containerized trees. So here in the carousel you have little containerized plants, and they're swinging around. This is scarifying the ground, making the mounds. The plant is dropped down, planted into the ground and fermed, and he moves on to another spot. So one man working the two levers can plant all of those trees mechanically. After a couple of years in the ground, when they get over the vegetation, sometimes they have to be sprayed to keep down the weeds. You have to watch the disease, you have to watch animals. Sometimes the animals can damage them lower down or eat the tops off them. But this is a typical plantation after 4 or 5 years. It grows on like this. These are very good trees in that you can see the leaders on them, very tall. So these are growing by that much every year. So you know those trees are very suited to those conditions in the site. This is a typical large forestry block. This is a picture from Glondav, which is tucked away between Ballyvourney, Mill Street and Macroom. And those trees that you see here, they're not dead trees, those are larch trees, which gives a nice contrast. This picture was taken just in January, 2 months ago. By now, in March or April, those larch trees will have got greener. The forests have to be thinned out. The trees are planted so closely that they will never develop into large trees unless they're thinned out. So here is a typical forestry timber harvester with an attachment on the end of the crane that reaches for the trees, grabs the trees, cuts them down and cuts them into the lengths like this on the ground. So these are very expensive machines. They're purpose-built. The only job they do is timber harvesting. Here again, another large-sized timber harvester. The first machine I showed was thinning the forest. At a later stage, when it's about 40 years old, all of the trees are felled in the forest, and then it's replanted. This is a typical situation, a clear fell site where all of the trees are being felled. A lot of the forests are on sloping ground, so machines are at their limit, and sometimes the machines are not even able to travel the steep slopes. He places the timber to the side here in piles. Different lengths go into different heaps, and all the branches and the treetops are under the machine, and he drives on top of those to protect the ground. After the harvester then has done the business and cut the trees into the lengths, this is the machine, we call it the forwarder. It's on like a tractor trailer. In soft conditions, they have to wear these or put on these band tracks. These are steel tracks to keep them up on the ground. So he takes a load of timber, maybe 6 ton, and brings it out onto the roadside and stacks it for the lorries. Again, a picture taken in February this year, a clear fell site. All the branches and treetops are still green on the ground. It's a fresh site, the machines are still here, but this is an area that's being clear felled. After a couple of months, when the summer comes, or after a few months anyhow, the needles will fall off the branches. Everything dries up, so all the nutrients that were there in the needles and the treetops go back into the soil and into the ground again, and straight away that forest is replanted. So there is an obligation to plant a forest. Once a forest is cut down, it has to be replanted. So here, this is probably harvested for 3 or 4 months. You have an excavator in here now doing some drainage and cultivation work, and the excavator will make some mounds, and then that forest will be replanted. What we're all used to seeing, lorries on the road. This is a typical timber lorry. A lot of timber moves through Macroom particularly, and it goes from the South Kerry area and west of Macroom to the sawmills. So where are these sawmills? What's happening to timber around the country? The sawmill sector is after getting very developed in recent years. There's over 100 sawmills in the country in total, but of that there are 10 very large ones, and they take about 90% of the timber. So those big sawmills, Grangers or Southern Forestry Enterprises down in Enniskeane, Palfab outside Macroom, which is near Kilmurray. You have Glennons up in Fermoy. All around the country then you have sawmills dotted. As you can see, Macroom is somewhere here on the map. No sawmill west of Macroom, so all of the timber that's growing back around here has to come east to the sawmills, and that's why we often see the lorries coming loaded through Macroom. A lot of the sawmills have developed from family ownership, smaller sawmills that got bigger over the years, and they've made large investments, up to 65 million in recent years, into their plants. There's also some board mills. So the board mills in the country are in Waterford and Clonmel, where you have these factories here. Willamette, it's a medium density fiberboard factory in Clonmel. There's a very large oriented strandboard factory, an OSB factory in Waterford. And in Scariff, there's a small chipboard factory. Up here, Masonite, which is in County Leitrim, where there's very little industry, but there's a very big timber industry now, and it's manufacturing door frames and window frames, and also a board mill up in the north of Ireland. The timber that's made, or that's used in these factories, we call them board mills. It's all of the small timber coming from the forest thinnings. It's not the large timber. The large timber goes to the sawmills for the houses and construction timber. What's made in these factories, in these board mills, is something like this. This here is OSB board. That's made in Waterford, mostly exported, but the market is developing in Ireland as well as Europe. So last year the factory took in about 500,000 tonne of timber to produce these kind of boards. It replaces plywood to a large extent, and it's in construction, in shuttering and all that type of thing. Here we have MDF, medium density fiberboard, which is used in furniture making, cabinet making. This is an oak piece, but they can come in all sorts of different finishes. But the centre here is not the natural timber, it's processed. It's the small forest thinnings chipped up and compressed into this board, which is a very workable board. The Forest Service versus Coillte, or who is the Forest Service and who is Coillte? People get a little mixed up and confused. The Forest Service, to start with, is a government body that deals with the national forest policy. The grants, the administration of grants, EU grants for the forest roads, the licensing for planting. So the Forest Service are civil service people dealing with grants mainly. Coillte then. Coillte was set up in 1998 to manage the National Forest Estate. the timber was growing. The timber that was planted in the 50s and the 60s needed to be harvested, and it didn't suit a civil service organisation. So this company was set up to manage all the national estate. So how was it run? It was set up by the government. There's a board of directors, which are people from outside companies, accountants and the likes. They look in and make major decisions. The chief executive is in charge of all the day-to-day operations. And then you have all the staff in Coillte from there down. So it's actually divided now into two main sections. So you have the normal management, the foresters throughout the country managing the forests and the harvesting and the marketing of the timber. These would all come in under this area. But Coillte has developed a lot of businesses over the number of years since it came into being. So you have different other companies within the company. The reason Coillte was set up, and this was the government directive, was to manage or to operate on a commercial basis. And I underline commercial because everything has to be looked at on a commercial basis in accordance with efficient and sustainable silvicultural practices. So everybody talks about sustainable forest management. So you cannot take out more timber than is growing in there. So you must know how much you're harvesting and how much is actually growing. So there's always going to be more timber growing. To manage the resources available in a manner consistent with the company objectives, to establish wood-based industries and to participate with others in the forestry to enhance the profitable operation of the company. Now I mentioned the big factory in Waterford that's making the OSB, the Oriental Strandboard. That is now fully owned by Coillte. So there's an example of Coillte getting involved in the industry. The other companies that Coillte are involved in, SmartPly, as I said, it's 100% owned by Coillte. We have a small consultancy unit who go overseas and advise other countries, maybe Eastern Europe, on how to reorganise and manage forests. There's an Irish Forest Unit Trust, which is a pension fund investment. Some people like to invest in forestry as a pension fund. Coillte has also brought in an Austrian company, Griffner, and have started up making timber houses in Mullingar last year. So now we're making timber framed houses. Within the company, Coillte has other businesses. It is primarily a forestry company, but operates these range of businesses based on the forest asset or the skills base. So Coillte nurseries, all of the 12 nurseries that were in the Forest Service years ago have been rationalised, and now it's one nursery, and that nursery is up in Ballintemple in Carlow, are growing around 60 million plants every year. Other nurseries, like the one in Kilvoutra near Clondrohid in Macroom, they have largely closed down around the country. The main nursery has irrigation systems, it has cold storage, it has all the modern technology. Christmas tree farms. Coillte operate 3 main farms, one in Wicklow, one in South Tipperary and one in Roscommon. And these are noble for Christmas trees and they're mainly grown for the export market. Forestry services. Coillte are involved in getting involved with farmers in planting land through various partnerships arrangements, and there are newer arrangements coming on stream all the time. Wood products. Coillte has a small sawmill in Dundrum in Tipperary to manufacture floorboards and things. It's a hardwood mill. It's a small mill, but it works in hardwoods, where most of the forestry is softwood. Property sales, leasing, development. There are small little bits of land being sold off, non-strategic areas of land. Tourism and leisure. Coillte operate a couple of forest parks, one in Avondale in Wicklow and one in Killikeen and Lochkey up the country. Civil engineering, a small unit within Coillte are into consultancy and manufacture or make some roads, and they're involved in landfill and various other things. Tree care is a tree surgery unit for taking down dangerous trees. So Coillte operate in a couple of regions in the country. There's a tree care unit based around Cork, and they will do work on dangerous trees and the likes of roadside ones for local authorities and for bigger organisations generally. Landscape and services. Coillte have another area that's focused on, say, motorway landscaping and roadside landscaping and that type of business. And training and safety courses are run for various people on health and safety and manual handling and operation of chainsaws and various other things. So Coillte is involved to a limited degree in the wind energy area, mobile phone masts and landfill. So lots of different entities to the overall Coillte portfolio. Changes happening all the time. Voluntary retirement packages. A lot of the staff in Coillte are gone over the 50-year-old mark. There was about 2,600 staff in Coillte when it was formed in 1989, and before that there was up to 5,000 when there was a lot more manual work going on. But now this 2,500 has come down to 1,000, and that 1,000 staff is for the whole of the country, and it includes office staff plus forest workers, forest managers. Everybody in the country now comes into that. The reason it operates on such a low staff is that contractors now carry out a lot of the work in the forests. For example, in the harvesting area and the haulage, there are contracts giving out for €30 million annually. There's a lot of other work given out on contract in the forest, in the whole planting area, fencing, drainage and spraying, making roads, upgrading or repairing of roads. So a lot of the work is done on contract. In the timber production area, which is mainly where I work myself, we're now producing in the country around 3 million cubic metres each year, which is basically 3 million tonnes of timber. And that's going to be the case every year from here on. About half of it is sold standing, so the forest is sold to the sawmills and they engage their own contractors to come in and take it out. And the other half, Coillte will be involved with the contractors. So the sawmills normally buy the large timber, and this is the construction timber that goes into the house making and things. These are the bigger sawmills. While Coillte will be involved in supplying the board mills, where the forest thinnings go to in the Waterford and the Clonmel areas, or stake customers, anybody making stakes looking for small timber. Sometimes it's from premature clear fell. So if for some reason the forest is thinned before its maturity date, the timber is small and it goes to this market. In the last 15 or 20 years, we have seen the production of timber rise from very, very low levels, constantly rising, and the graph is still rising up to around 2004, and here it levels out. So at this stage, we're somewhere above 3 million, that's 3 million cubic metres, or tonnes per annum, and it's going to stay like that. So the Coillte Forest Estate is basically static. Coillte are not buying new land, so they have what they have. Northern Ireland, somewhat similar to our situation. The production is rising, then levels out. Where the difference is in the private planting. And we hear a lot about the farmer planting in the last 15 years, 10 years, 5 years. What was planted in those recent years is starting to deliver and will start to deliver more when it comes up around, say, 2010. So material or places that were planted 6 or 8 years ago will now be 16 or 18 years old, and they'll be coming in for thinnings. So the volume will be coming from the private forests, and that will rise and rise. So the biggest difference in the whole forestry timber production is that the private forestry, the green area, is going to start delivering. This shows very clearly the breakdown of Coillte versus the private forestry. So you could say the public area is Coillte, basically the green one, and the private being the blue. So the private forestry, you can see, was very small in 85, was growing steadily. Some hiccups, went backwards for a bit, went up again with grants and incentives in the middle 90s, dropped again, went up. And if this graph was to continue, it probably fell back a bit last year and probably has picked up again this year. So a lot is dependent on government policy, EU money or government money. But the green, which then you could say is Coillte, which was always fairly steady back along, came up a bit with some grants, but since then has tapered off down to very low levels. So the whole thing has reversed from Coillte being the big one, private being the small one. Now what's happening in the planting area, private is the big one and Coillte is the small one. So in addition, Coillte also plant approximately 8,000 hectares, which would be over 18,000 acres every year of reforestation. So what we're looking at here is afforestation. This is new planting. So the new planting is, as I say, private, but the reforestation, the replanting, is largely Coillte at the moment. Where does all this timber go? Well, the big timber, the sawlog, goes into the house construction market. The middle-sized timber then goes into the pallet making. The small timber goes into the board mills. When it comes down to the residues, all these branches and treetops, various people will ask, why are they not being used? Well, they're needed on the forest floor in a lot of cases for the machines to travel, because the forests are planted on very soft ground, and by the time the machines have travelled on them, the material is fairly well pushed into the ground at times. A lot of people think the timber is going for paper making. It's not. There is no paper industry at all in the country, but there is a good demand for all of the other timber that's there. All of the timber basically is harvested mechanically, where 15-20 years ago a lot of it was by chainsaw. Chainsaws now are still there, but only the small part is felled by chainsaw, so it's mechanical harvesting with the big machines. So what type of species are out there? This shows here the large proportion, 57% being pure spruce. So of the current forest estate, that's what's out there. Spruce. Pine then is another common one, the green yellow colour, 11%, and spruce and pine mixed together. So some forests have that. They will all be the evergreens, the non-native species, which Coillte are often criticised for, but a lot of the land where this is planted, they would not grow any type of tree other than spruce or pine. Then you have a mixture of varieties between larch, other conifers like Douglas fir and those, oaks, which are the hardwoods, and the beeches, and other broadleaves. So these would be the hardwoods here, forming the lesser proportion. But what's happening now is that this proportion is increasing, and this proportion of pines and spruces is decreasing. And particularly because of the private planting, where farmers have land that is better than the real bogland that was planted, they can now plant more varieties of trees because the ground is good enough. With all the forestry that's out there, Coillte has this open forest policy, which was adopted by the Forest Service in 1965. Coillte owns 1 million acres, which is an awful lot of land. It's the biggest landowner in the country. And more people are using the forests. The recreational use is increasing. You find a lot more people now doing hill walking and orienteering, horse riding, quad biking, even shooting. There are licenses for people to shoot. So some of these are not very compatible with each other, so it has to be managed and regulated. So you say then, why is there barriers in the entrances to most of the forests if we have an open forest policy? Well, it's to do with security of the estate, the timber. Otherwise people could maybe drive in and do what they like, take loads of timber at night time, whatever. It's also to prevent illegal dumping. The forests have been used quite a lot in the past for people they want to drop a mattress, a fridge or whatever. So the forests are open, but people normally might have to park their cars and walk through the forests. Some forests are open to drive through, but then some are restricted to harvesting operations or whatever. There's a recent example, February, of some hill walkers out around Caherdowney, Glowndab, between Mill Street, Ballavourney, Macroom. If you look closely, you might recognise a former Macroom councillor and TD, former Michael Creed. Typical of the scenery that you will find in some of the forests, the more mature forests, which makes it very pleasant to wander through. So in parting, all I can say is enjoy the forest. There's lots of information on Coillte available on the website, so if anybody has access to the internet or computers, go in there, have a look at coillte.ie, and there's loads and loads of information about Coillte. So,
Bridget. Maybe just to keep an eye on it. Is she done the right thing that I know? Yeah, if he's going down the walking, I say. I suppose maybe Patrick called the shots across the so yeah, Joe, you can say whenever. That's what he's got there. Would he pass the castle gate? And I'd be yeah. Would that do? Yeah. Are you ready to go?
Yeah, I am. 10 miles from here today. Yeah. Johnny ready there over? I know that. So, when you get cars out, who do that? Just to make it.
I wonder if we just let him go, if we stop it and hold it again another fight.
Right. Yes. Sure, we can arrange that. Sure, you might give me one. Yeah. Right, back.
Who's in the hospital?
Huh?
Who's in the hospital?
Then close the door. I think we've got shoes on. In the bell.
Hello, bro. Good joke,
Sharon was here for the
I was on to date with a hundred clothes.
Do you want us in a passionate embrace?
Right, to be alright, I don't mind.
A soldier having, get you under the cloak.
Alright.
Just women used to get these apparently when they got married.
I thought you were just messing with it.
Oh, no.
That they had.
There's some deadly lines in there. It's a real scene for hanging it. Like.
Yeah. The lowest common denominator.
Usually we go about it.
I'm going to the Hooded Club tonight myself. I'm going to cover my face. In case I didn't know the way. You're a morning kind of guy, are you?
Walking over.
You know, it's
No big deal, eh?
Yeah, the walking on me.
We did.
The only thing we're short now is... You know yourself.
Can we split? Can I take the soldier? And you take two laps? Yes. We don't like it in Mariana. You know?
Actually, no, you can do here is very maxed down. So,
Artolaire, the hero. Oh, come on, Art. What are our chances on the barrel?
I top the barrel
A
anyway.
trained killer, a lazy braggart, and a womanizer by all accounts.
No rapist may hold or display any gun, sword, weapon, pistol, or weapon of offence or... I'm making it clear.
Joe, step forward about 2 feet. Right.
1 second.
Can you imagine we'll be really the movies? We'll be out all day.
I think the only usual talk.
Lovely setting, right?
Yeah.
We'll do it again now.
Football socks.
After.
They have to be football socks.
Yeah. They're very good.
And it was early in the morning, it was so cold. She had to eat ice cubes so that her championship of course is on this weekend.
Well, Sean, where do you get them? Would anyone in the world guess know what that is?
It's pretty solid, isn't it?
Yes, very solid.
My
Well, in
God.
fact, this amazingly is part of the Transatlantic cable that was placed right under the Atlantic Ocean in 1866. The Telegraph system that was being brought at that point between actually Valencia Island and Newfoundland. And it was very kindly made available to us by Michael Quirk from Killarney. And it's absolutely amazing and wonderful to have this very special item. And just to show how enterprising groups can be, a very enterprising group in Cahersiveen have made very special ornaments based upon this very beautiful cable. And here it is. It says Transatlantic Telegraph cable laid in 1866 between Valencia Island and Newfoundland. And there you can see in the very centre the core. It is through that particular core at the very centre that the actual transmission used to actually happen between one part of between Europe and America. Isn't it amazing? But look how wonderfully protected then it was in that particular way. And this has been placed upon Valencia Slate. This is Valencia Slate.
And of course, that's open
what
up
a beautiful item.
lovely
And this
item.
was very kindly presented by Dan Cronin and his wife in Killarney very recently to Mill Street Museum. And in fact, when I first took it out of the box itself, I thought it was an iron for a moment, and just to discover that it was something really, really, really precious.
Yes.
So it just shows how enterprising groups can be. That was an enterprising group called the Ivora group in back in Cahersiveen. Now, another very real link with the Atlantic Ocean is inside in this very box here. And this was very specially presented to us by Michael and Veronica O'Callaghan here from Liscahan. And if we open it up, it relates to the Titanic, in fact. And there was it's an actual very special sketch of the Titanic itself. But down here we can see a spoon. And this, in fact, is a replica. This, in fact, was a replica of the spoon that was on the captain's table in the Titanic.
My goodness.
A replica of the actual silver spoon.
A silver spoon.
And this was recently presented to Mill Street Museum by Michael and Veronica O'Callaghan from Liscahan. Really, really very special. And not only did we get this, but we got a very special certificate also. And the certificate shows a very young little baby here that was in fact saved from the Titanic. And many years later, this is that very baby, because this is Melvina Dean. And Melvina Dean is one of the last surviving members of people that was in the Titanic itself. And there's Melvina Dean's autograph right down here. So this is really a very special, very, very special item in Mill Street Museum, thanks to Michael and Veronica. So there's just some of the items that we'll be sharing. They're just some of the items that we have at the moment, but we'll share many more in time to come. And now we're going to let you hear an audio tape. And this audio tape is very special. So John Joe Moriarty is ready at the tape recorder over there, and we're going to hear the tape now of a very special recording. Right. We're waiting for the drumming. It's later. as we were watching there, that very beautiful scene, painted in fact by Mary Shaughnessy, who was of course Mary Murphy from Pound Hill here in Mill Street, we were listening to the wonderful whistling and drumming of the late John Sing O'Sullivan. And at a later programme we're going to have a lot more about that wonderful person who evokes so many memories here in this area. John's wonderful link with the Mill Street Pipe Band, with GAA, and with so many other things. But he was a man who had such deep regard for music. And it brings us very specially on to our special guest tonight, Hannah Kelleher, the Secretary of Mill Street Coillte Éireann. And Hannah, there's something really special happening on Sunday on this silver anniversary year of your organisation.
There is indeed, Sean, thank you. We have the 22nd Féile Ceoil occurring here in Mill Street next Sunday on the 4th, or the 4th, or the 4th.
Oh, sorry. Give me the Bible there.
Existence, but it's the 22nd Féile Ceoil.
Now, as you were watching that very beautiful picture of Clara Mountain and the Finau River and the two swans, this very special painting was done, of course, by Mary Shaughnessy. That was Mary Murphy of Pound Hill. And we were listening there to the wonderful whistling and the absolutely expert drumming of the late John Sing O'Sullivan. Now, of course, we'll have a very special programme about that very wonderful musician and great person, gentleman here in Mill Street in time to come. But it brings us so very appropriately on to an organisation which has such great regard for our tradition and very especially our musical tradition and our Irish heritage. And we're absolutely thrilled to be joined by Hannah Kelleher, who is of course the Secretary of the Mill Street branch of Coillte Éireann. And Hannah, a very special occasion on the 4th of the 4th of the 4th.
There is indeed, Sean.
Next Sunday.
Next Sunday, indeed. We have the 22nd Féile Ceoil, which will be held here in Mill Street. Féile Ceoil is held every year. The Coillte Éireann has been involved with the Mill Street for the past 25 years. And indeed we are very fortunate here in Mill Street because we have been afforded the premises of the Mill Street Community School, and we have to say a big thank you to Mr. Brennan for years gone past, and to Mr. Piggott, who's principal there at the moment.
It's been held there for quite a few years now, hasn't
it?
And a very appropriate venue.
Very appropriate, and it's because it's all under one roof. It's so much easier than other Féile Ceoils that you will go to around the country. You know, so we are very fortunate. It's also so much safer, you know, from the children's aspect. You know.
There's an enormous amount of preparation for you as committee members preparing for this day, Hannah.
There is indeed. All Féile Ceoils, I think you don't realise the amount of background preparation that goes into them. But in Mill Street we have a very high standard insofar as while we encourage all the children, no matter what their abilities are, because after all, competition is not the aim really. While it is a competition, it's more to allow them the chance to perform and to participate. Exactly.
Excellent.
And we have very renowned adjudicators who really know what they're doing and who can encourage the children along the right path, and you know, who can encourage the best of what's good in Irish music.
And some really gifted participants aren't there? Over the years now,
absolutely.
The standard is very high, isn't it?
It is. It is. It goes from the beginners to the very high, you know, to the people who are old hands at the music, and also of course at the Irish Europe, our Irish speaking, and traditional singing both in English and Irish, and all aspects of our Irish culture I think are taken into account. We have set dancing, which starts at 12 o'clock, and the other competitions then begin at 2. And
it goes on right through the day.
It goes on right through, and a long day it is.
It's a full day. I know it, yes.
And a long day it is. And we hope that all the children they get their chance, they can perform and do their best. And of course we have to give a very big thank you to Henry Cronin, who he teaches a class for us in the GA Hall in Mill Street
Oh, yes.
on a Friday evening.
Every week?
Every week.
My goodness.
Every week. And Henry gives them fantastic individual attention,
Yes.
and he then rounds it off with, he gets his little
Yes.
group together and
Yes.
gets them all playing.
Doesn't music open so many doors at an international level?
Isn't it the universal language?
It is, absolutely.
It is. And as so far, here in Ireland, I think we're very, very fortunate insofar as it is so much part of our own identity.
Yes.
And it's so important for children to learn
Yes.
their culture and their
Yes.
language and their music and their dancing.
Tremendous. But you yourself, Hannah, you have such great regard for the importance of groups coming together on a musical basis, because you have your own band in school, I believe. Yes, yes.
I do. I think it's particularly for children where the onus is taken off the individual. You know,
Yes.
my personal belief is that while they, participate in music and cooperate and enjoy it, and I think, the biggest thing that we can have and that we can give our children is enjoyment in our language and in our culture.
Tremendous.
And
by the way,
that way they can appreciate it.
Very much. Do people come from a very wide area to actually participate in the Mill Street
They do.
Flaghole?
They do, indeed, Sean, they do. They come from, we get a good following, really. We get good support from the Greater Macroom catchment area,
Yes.
from the Mill Street catchment area, going back as far as Hollymount, really.
Yes.
And Kilcorny, the
Oh, yeah.
outer,
Very wide.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's known as a Féileachole, isn't
A
this right?
féileachole.
I think I was calling it a Flaghole. The Flaghole is slightly bigger.
The Flaghole then will be in me. And
Oh,
that's
yes, yes.
Fermoy.
Slightly bigger.
But usually, a lot of the competitors, a lot of the contestants, will say that would be that would come here to perform. A lot of them would go on to the Flan.
Yes,
A lot
yes.
of them, and a lot of the judges would encourage people. So, from that aspect, even if they didn't win, if a judge saw a child or a person, for that matter, that would have a lot of ability, or that they could see a lot of ability in, they would encourage them to go on. So it's important. It is good.
Yes.
It's a good thing to happen.
Over the years, have you seen lots of different changes in music, Hannah? From the point of view of development and, let's say, set dancing and that whole area, has there been changes?
Well, there have been a lot of
yes.
changes, yes, indeed.
Yes.
But of course, Coillte, I suppose, are trying to promote the real traditional dancing,
Yes.
and the real traditional music. That's why we have a lot of even international influences coming into Irish music at the moment.
Yes.
So I suppose from that angle, again, Coillte is coming into its own, because it's promoting the true Irish traditional music, language, dance. Everything that is totally our own, But
So, Hannah, it's going to be a very full programme, and as you say, I'm sure you're hoping that as large a crowd, and I know there's going to be a very big crowd there, but the larger the crowd, the better.
the larger the crowd, the better, absolutely. The more fun can be got from it, and the more good it will do for the children, because after all, it's the next generation. It's really to the children we are catering to in the greater part of it. And our children are our future, aren't they, really?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And,
So it's tremendous. Hannah, we know that we will have a much longer programme on the whole organisation itself, Coillte Cultóirí here in Mill Street, because of its celebration of the 25 years. So we're going to finish in a very special way now, Hannah, because we have some film of that wonderful gentleman, John Singh O'Sullivan,
Great.
that you heard whistling there just as we started our interview. And this was in fact recorded just around the time of Eurovision, just before Eurovision in 1993, when John was in fact playing with a wonderful group inside in O'Callaghan's bar in the square in Mill Street, in Ted and Marion O'Callaghan's bar. And we'll watch out for John, because he's the man, of course, on the drums, and he's actually drumming on the table and adding some great rhythm. So here is John Singh O'Sullivan playing, and we thank you very much, Hannah, for having joined us here this evening.
Not at all, it was my
and
pleasure.
Have a wonderful day on Sunday, and we hope to be joining you and sharing some of the wonderful events with our viewers at a later point.
Great.
Thank you,
We
Hannah.
look forward to that.
That's
Thank you,
great.
Sean.
And over to that very special occasion in O'Callaghan's Bar in Mill Street around 1993. Right, now that's great. Lovely.
Anything you want to know, Sean?
Our good friend Coillte told us about a very special event in Green Glens relating to basketball. And yes, here is that wonderful poster of the Harlem Globetrotters. And this is their Euro Tour 2004. And they, of course, are going to be in the Green Glens in Mill Street for one night only on the 17th of April at 7:30 p.m. And just look at this absolutely fabulous poster. It's being held by, on the left-hand side, by John Moriarty. There we are. And on the right-hand side by Sean Murphy, two of our most dedicated members of the LTV2 television channel here from Mill Street. Gentlemen, thanks very much for holding one of the most, I suppose, impressive posters we've ever seen here in Mill Street. So we'll move for a moment then as we conclude our programme this week. We of course want to thank our very special guests. We have, in fact, of course, we had Hannah Kelleher from Coillte, and of course we had our very good friend Coillte, and assisted very ably over here, of course, by Sean and John Joe. And Danjo, of course, has been on camera this week, and in fact, we're going to end our programme on this occasion with having a very special look at a section of the wonderful video that was made in the Oban area in 1998 to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Butter Road. Now, of course, we'd like to remind you also, before we continue with that very special video, we'd like to remind you also that you can contact us here at Fionau, Mount Leader, Clara Road, Mill Street, County Cork, or email us at millstreetmuseum@aircom.net. Now, these will appear on the screen just now. And so, just a reminder of what we're going to have next week. We're going to share some more very historic items. In fact, we're going to share items that relate to a very famous Lord Mayor of Cork and to a very popular Bishop of Kerry. We're also going to share many other archival video footage with you, and we're going to leave you this week with a very special piece of advice, a very witty piece of advice from Oscar Wilde, because he said, always forgive your enemies, nothing annoys them so much. And I think, Coillte, that's a very special word of advice there.
I think it's a very good idea.
So I think until next week, we'll bid you all farewell, and good day shiv slán, it's gugudi day shiv, and do enjoy our very special video section now on the commemoration of the Butter Road in 1998, the 250th commemoration. So until next week then, slán is Spanish.
Slán. You're pretending talking now, like
I was
Brian
watching.
Dobson. Like Brian Dobson.
Sorry, maybe we...
That it?
Now, do we put the music on at that point?
Could you expose the harps another little bit if that is possible?
That's the only thing it's about to show us, that it's from a computer.
Yeah.
So if it went in
another tiny bit, Denjo, just that, but make sure that they know what a harp is. And maybe a little bit to one side. To one side and show one harp.
To shift the bottom of the screen down. Move your camera up, I should say.
Up, is it?
Yeah, move the camera up. Move it way up. Oh,
right.
No.
That's true. Yeah. If you actually zoomed in a little bit further, then I'd say that'll go.
Yeah, he did push back there when I said.
Further even.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, as such, till
You'll still see the harp.
You'll still.
So long as you know what the harp is.
You would. That's grand.
That's right.
That's perfect. It sort of gives you know.
An Irish air.
So while that's on, will there be any sound?
Well, if you have.
Now I'll go back now. Sorry, it's number 2, and I have to go back now.
It's the old.
Now 1 second. That's it. Have I tilted it?
Am I picking enough of it now? Yeah, you're perfect at that then, Joyce, yeah? If we could set it at that and leave it.
But what I'm saying is that...
Hi, good night. Father Gabriel here. I walked into school yesterday and one of the new teachers said to me, "You look very ritual today." I had the blessed candles in my hand and the red stole for the Feast of St. Blaise. And really, the last 3 days have been very ritual days here in Ireland. Sunday was the Feast of St. Bridget, a big day in many counties in Ireland. There are many different rituals associated with it. I know in County Kildare, the man of the house would leave out a lump of linen on the doorstep. But before that, he would have gone round the house 3 times, knocked on the door 3 times, and put down the linen, left it there overnight, and then it would be brought into the house the next day and put over the range in that house for the year. And if anybody was sick during the year, a snippet of that linen would be taken from it and put into the bed of the sick person. Then, of course, we had Candlemas, when we celebrate the feast of the presentation of the child Jesus in the temple. The light of Christ finally being proclaimed to the Jewish people. And there, representing the Old Testament, are Simeon and Anna, the prophetess. And then, of course, we have St. Blaise himself. St. Blaise was an Armenian. Armenia is a tiny little country tucked away there beside Turkey, modern-day Georgia, and Azerbaijan. It's a country with a history much like our own. A country where the people, even though they accepted Christianity from very early on, in fact, it was the first Christian nation, but they have suffered persecution. They have suffered for the belief of their faith. That's the great doctrine that we believe, that Christ is God made man, that he saw fit to become a human being and show us that in our everyday life is where we will find the divine. And we can, if we set aside time each day to look at our life and to see where is God touching my life today. Good night and God bless.